It started like any other morning until it didn't. Marissa Lane, a 54-year-old black woman with a quiet presence and an intellect sharper than steel, stepped out of her silver Buick and walked up the broad stone steps of the Savannah Federal Courthouse. The early Georgia sun filtered through hanging moss, casting long lines across the marble, as if the trees themselves were bowing to the weight of the day ahead. Her navy blazer was pressed, her leather portfolio tucked under one arm, and her stride steady heels tapping against the granite with the controlled rhythm of someone who had fought long and hard for calm. She didn't wear her robe outside the courtroom. Never had. She didn't like to be seen as the judge when she entered a building. She liked to be a citizen first, observant, present, aware. That morning, she intended to walk in quietly, take her seat behind the bench, and begin proceedings in a nationally watched police misconduct trial. But that's not how it went. At the security checkpoint, Deputy Gerald Trask, a heavy-set, red-faced bailiff with an affinity for control watcher, approached with a growing scowl. Marissa didn't recognize him, and, clearly, the reverse was true as well. As she approached, his posture shifted, chest out, hand raised like a wall. "Ma'am," he barked, "I need you to step out of line." Marissa blinked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Step over here." "Random screening," Trask said, his tone laced with something unspoken but heavy enough to choke the air. She paused, set her portfolio down carefully, and pulled her federal ID from her inside pocket. "I'm Judge Lane. I'm scheduled to preside over courtroom 3A in 15 minutes. Please return my credentials." Trask snatched the badge without looking. He stuffed it in his pocket. Marissa's expression didn't flicker, but her voice tightened. "You will return that immediately." He smirked. "In a hurry, sweetheart." The word stung like a slap. Another guard, a younger woman by the scanner, shifted on her feet but said nothing. Trask gestured. "Follow me." Without another word, he clamped his thick hand around her upper arm and led her away from the checkpoint, away from the crowd, and into a small, windowless security room. Inside, a metal chair, a rolling table with scanners, and a pair of electric clippers. Marissa's throat tightened. "I did not consent to this," she said firmly. "This is illegal. You have no probable cause." Trask didn't flinch. "You look suspicious." "That's enough for me." Two more officers entered. One grabbed her wrist. The third stood by the door, watching silent. "This is assault," Marissa said. "I want your names." No one answered. Trask picked up the clippers. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "You could be hiding something in your hair," he said, pointing at her thick silver coils. "Standard protocol." The buzz filled the room. Before she could move, cold steel pressed to her scalp. The first lock fell to the floor. Then another, and another. Marissa sat motionless, her breath stuck in her throat. She did not cry. She did not scream. She did not blink. She only watched the strands of her identity drop like leaves in winter. "She looks better already," one officer chuckled. "Now you look presentable," Trask muttered. When it was over, Trask tossed the clippers on the tray, returned her badge, and gestured toward the door. "Courtroom's that way," he said with a smirk. Marissa stood, her fists clenched, her face unreadable. She left that room and walked through the hallway like nothing had happened. But inside, something seismic had shifted. Not rage, not humiliation, purpose. Because what none of them even considered was this. She was not there to testify. She was not there as an observer. She was not some defendant dragged in for judgment. She was the judge, and in less than 10 minutes, she would be seated on the bench. What happened next would not just be about justice. It would become history. By the time Marissa stepped through the wide, double doors of courtroom 3A, silence had already settled like a fog. Every head turned. Every eye followed her path. No one said a word, but the room hummed with tension. A collective pause held mid-breath. She walked steadily to the bench, her heels clicking like a metronome against the polished marble. She didn't look at Trask, who was now posted stiffly near the side exit, his face pale and jaw clenched. She didn't look at the attorneys whispering urgently to one another. She didn't even glance at the journalist who had begun typing furiously the moment she entered. She looked only at the bench, at the robe folded carefully over the chair, and she picked it up without help, without ceremony, and slipped it on. The robe didn't hide the fresh patches on her scalp, but it didn't need to. The moment she sat down, something shifted, not just in her, in the room itself. "The court is now in session," she announced, her voice calm but unshakable. "We will begin with preliminary testimony in Case 48-2A, United States v. Savannah Police Department." A soft rustle passed through the courtroom as the first witness was called. Officer James Rullo, white man in his early 40s, took the stand with practiced composure. He had been part of a tactical unit accused of excessive force during a peaceful vigil the year prior. Marissa listened as he described standard procedure, escalation protocol, and reasonable response under perceived threat. Her expression didn't change, but when she finally spoke, it cut deeper than any gavel ever could. "Officer Rule," she said, "at what point did a kneeling teenager with their hands up become a threat?" The officer hesitated. There was a crowd. It was tense. "Was the teen armed?" "No, Your Honor." "Did the teen make verbal threats?" "No, Your Honor." "Did they move toward officers?" "No." Then described the threat again. Slowly. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. The courtroom was quiet again. That specific, pointed quiet when truth makes its entrance. Uninvited but undeniable. Marissa continued questioning. Witness after witness. Statement after statement. But the moment everyone would remember came not from the testimonies, but from her. During a midday recess, with the room partially emptied, Marissa turned toward the bailiff's desk. "Deputy Trask," she said. Her voice carried no heat, just precision. "Approach the bench." He hesitated. "Now." He obeyed. "State your full name for the record," she said. "Gerald Trask," he mumbled. "And your position?" "Court bailiff for the Southern District." Marissa nodded slowly. "How long have you served in this role?" 12 years. She leaned forward. "How many complaints have been filed against you during that time?" Trask froze. I don't have that number." "I do," she said. She tapped a folder beside her. 9. All from black women. All dismissed. A beat passed. Trask swallowed. "Your Honor, I didn't know who you were this morning. I thought." "And that," she interrupted, "is exactly the problem." She stood. "In this courthouse, power is not determined by robes or race or routine. It is determined by justice. And this morning, you violated that principle in the most grotesque way." Trask looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. "Effective immediately, Deputy Trask, you are relieved of duty pending criminal investigation for assault, harassment, and abuse of authority." She turned to the court officers near the rear. "Escort him from the premises. Separate holding." "You can't do this," he barked, panic rising in his voice. But she already had. And this time, the silence that followed was not heavy. It was cleansing. As the hearing resumed, something deeper had begun. A shift in the foundation not just of that trial, but of the courthouse itself. The system that once protected men like Trask was being peeled back, layer by layer. Over the following days, the trial gained national attention. Protesters gathered outside. Victims came forward with stories they had once buried. Staff who had looked the other way were now on notice. Judges who once ignored complaints found themselves summoned before review boards. And at the center of it all sat Judge Marissa Lane. She was no longer just a presider of cases. She was a symbol, a turning point, a reckoning. Then came the letter, delivered by hand, sealed in gold, an invitation to Washington. The Department of Justice wanted her to testify before the Judiciary Oversight Committee, not as a victim, as a reformer. When Marissa entered that Capitol hearing room weeks later, her presence carried the weight of every name that had been erased, every voice silenced in courtrooms like hers. She didn't bring flash. She didn't bring outrage. She brought records, evidence, policy, and a proposal. She called it the Lane Resolution, a mandate for mandatory bias training, regular audits of complaint logs, public access to misconduct summaries, and immediate suspension powers granted to presiding judges in cases of documented abuse. The committee didn't just listen. They stood. Months later, the Lane resolution passed in committee. Within a year, it became federal statute under the broader Judicial Integrity Act. And across the country, courtrooms quietly transformed. But Marissa didn't seek attention. She declined interviews. She refused book deals. She kept showing up to her courtroom at 7:45 a.m. Every morning, same Buick, same blazer, same calm stride. Except now, every time she passed through security, they didn't ask for ID. They stood and said, "Good morning, Your Honor," and meant it. One afternoon, as she exited the courthouse, a teenage girl was waiting just outside the steps. She had short hair, uneven, recently cut. She looked up shyly. "Judge Lane." Marissa nodded. "I just wanted to say, thank you for making space for people like me, for proving we can stand tall even after they try to cut us down." Marissa smiled. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "they didn't cut me down. They pruned me so I could grow back stronger." And with that, she walked toward her car, her silhouette long in the afternoon sun unbowed, unbroken, and finally fully seen.